And first I want to hand over to Andrew Sims, the author of the report and indeed of many books on climate and related issues.
You don't need to look very far at the moment to find various cultural references to the period of the 1940s, from the ubiquitous Keep Calm and Carry On poster, not to mention huge questions about the security of our food and fuel supplies. Just on, if you were listening to Radio 4 headlines yesterday, you'd have heard Fatih Birol from the International Energy Agency saying that he was pretty much convinced that unless there was an unimaginable, almost unimaginable change of events, we were committing ourselves to global temperature rises of 2 degrees or above. And anybody who's kind of dabbled in climate change will tell you that that's the point at which, generally speaking, the balance of risk shifts nastily against us about whether or not we will be able to contain and prevent the environmental dominoes falling. Yesterday, BP came out, almost amazingly, at the same time saying that in terms of their expected use of fossil fuels, they saw nothing but an upward curve of the use of all the major fossil fuels in coming years. So there's clearly some connection not being made. But here we sit with food prices going up, fuel prices going up, almost daily news of violent and extreme weather events around the world, none of which we can claim has a one-to-one relationship with climate change, but all of which are the types of events that will become more frequent and intense in a warming world. And just to kind of show how deeply these things resonate, if you looked at the Evening Standard a couple of days ago, drawing it all together, you see this marvellous graphic of Mervyn King, Governor of the Bank of England, dressed up a little bit like someone from Dad's Army, with fuel prices and food prices falling like World War II bombs on his head. So here we are, we're back. We know that we need to have a rapid transition of the economy, and it poses the question, how are we going to go about doing it? What are we going to do? Even Tim Yeo, Conservative head of the Climate Change and Energy Cross-Party Committee, said a couple of weeks ago, cutting spending on low-carbon technologies now would be like cutting the budget for Spitfires in 1939. So it's the scale of change that we want to draw people's attention to with this, and the fact that in a very compressed period of time, mostly between 1938 and 1944, against a very obvious threat, ultimately, but not in the early years. We forget the degree to which there were powerful arguments for appeasement in the mid to late 30s, and how hard it was to mobilise large sections of the establishment. It was a kind of a bit of an internal parliamentary rearguard action that Winston Churchill fought during the mid-1930s to get to the point where what now seems obvious was difficult to get to at that point. So the parallels with the Second World War, although not exact, are very illuminating. And when we look at the scale of change that we're talking about now, it may taste different, it may look different, it may feel different, but the kind of scale of change we're talking about is equable with what happened in that period. And not only did we manage to fundamentally re-engineer the productive base of the UK economy, but we achieved rapid and dramatic changes in lifestyle, which had some unexpected and unintended benefits. You saw one of the fastest falls in infant and maternal mortality during the war years, after a really tough period in the first 2 years, and with people walking more and cycling more and eating scientifically designed healthier diets, you saw a great rise in well-being. There's a lot more anecdotal evidence about the quality of communal life. Academics like to refer to as social capital going up during that period as well. And the lesson there, the big lesson, the simple one, is that when you have a coordinated and focused political will, rapid, deep change is possible. When we look at how transport changed, how agriculture changed, how the whole food chain was re-engineered, our energy use, everyday household consumption of items, how the publishing industry worked, how the entertainment industry worked, from the top to bottom of society, with pressure from the bottom up and the top down, these changes were achieved. But it wasn't easy. It all had to be argued for. I've got an original copy from 1940 here of Keynes' famous missive, How to Pay for the War. And Caroline has a tough job in Parliament and has all kinds of brickbats thrown at her to make her feel sort of less lonely in her challenge. I thought I'd just quote you this short passage from Keynes writing in 1940 as he was trying to argue for the wherewithal with which the war effort could be fought. And he wrote this. He says, "I've been charged with attempting to apply totalitarian methods to a free community. No criticism could be more misdirected. In a totalitarian state, the problem of the distribution of sacrifice does not exist. It is only in a free community that the task of government is complicated by the claims of social justice. The aim of these pages, therefore, is to devise a means of adapting the distributive system of a free community to the limitations of war." And now when we pose the question about the need to live within the available limits of the biosphere, we have a similar challenge. And in my own family, we're going to hear from Ruth Bond from the Federation of Women's Institutes later. My own grandmother, Lena Agnes Molyneux Sims, in Old Headington in Oxford, was at the forefront of the original Home Front, so I feel like kind of a line of thread running through my own family. I think that the last thing I wanted to say, just to kind of round off with, is that one of the obvious criticisms that might be thrown at us is, are we being melodramatic? Are we overstating our case? But if you just look at the last 12 to 18 months, and you think of the massive crop failures in Russia and the Ukraine, you think of the almost biblical floods in Pakistan and Australia, the murderous inundations in China and Brazil, and the way that fluctuations, upward fluctuations in the oil price and food commodity prices can dump at a stroke tens of millions of people into hunger and absolute poverty, and the knowledge that these weather extremes, at least for the short to medium term future, are likely to become more intense and frequent. I don't think we are overstating our case.